where it's like organic.
Well, first, who are you, Riley? I don't know who this is. I just pulled up this video. You're lagging. Or are you just frozen in time? Is he frozen for you, Eric?
Yeah, what a great time to freeze, dude.
Are you back?
Am I back?
You're back.
Yeah, you're
Okay,
back.
so who are you, Riley?
Okay, I'm Riley. Hello. I'm just a how would I say this? I'm a passionate and concerned citizen of the United States and the globe. Michael?
Hello everyone. My name is Michael. Who am I? I'm someone who is trying to understand what is going on and have discussion about it. So that is who I am. Both of us have a political science degree. So we do have some political science background. We both don't work in it in that field, but we're doing this as a way to try to connect to people and have people having different conversations about what's going on.
Okay, so with that being said, I would like to begin with a clip of someone who had in 2016 sort of been clearly written off by the establishment, but is now the winner of, well, we'll at least say the winner of one primary, and it seems like the winner of Iowa as well. So if we could fast forward to, we'll say a minute and 15 seconds, 1:15, and we'll play that for a minute.
45 years. So if you're asking me, do I think we should demand that the wealthy start paying the wealthiest, top 1/10 of 1%, start paying their fair share of taxes so we can create a nation and a government that works for all of us? Yes, that's exactly what I believe.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Steyer, you are the lone billionaire on this stage. What's your plan for closing the income gap?
Well, first of all, let me say this. Senator Sanders is right. There have been 40 years where corporations have bought this government, and those 40 years have meant a 40-year attack on the rights of working people and specifically on organized labor. And the results are as shameful as Senator Sanders says, both in terms of assets and in terms of income. It's absolutely wrong. It's absolutely undemocratic and unfair. I was one of the first people on this stage to propose a wealth tax. I would undo every Republican tax cut for rich people and major corporations. But there's something else going on here that is absolutely shameful, and that's the way the money gets split up in terms of earnings. As a result of taking away the rights of working people in organized labor, people haven't had a raise. 90% of Americans have not had a raise for 40 years. If you took the minimum wage from 1980 and just adjusted it for inflation, you get $11. It's $7.25.
So I have a lot of interesting things I think we could talk about, but Michael, would you like to start?
Okay.
Impressions, thoughts, yeah, anything.
Well, my first impression is I definitely do agree with kind of what he's saying. I think it's very interesting how the 1% continues to get richer, the middle class continues to shrink, and the poor continue to get poorer. I mean, I think today many feel the pinch of what is going on in society in terms of, like he was saying, minimum wage. I think a lot of people are either making $1 or $2 above minimum wage, if not minimum wage, especially depending on what state you're in. I mean, I know in California they have a higher minimum wage than somewhere in like Alabama. So I think it's very important that candidates are talking about this type of issue, because I think
what is the issue? So what? Yeah, like in one or two sentences, what do you think is the issue?
It's a good question.
That is the question.
I think that the issue is that people are working just as hard as, so if you have a lump sum of money from, say, a family member, and you invest it in something, right? And you're working, say, you work overtime to build this money, right? Well, someone who doesn't have that money can do just as much work and maybe not make as much money because they weren't able to have, let's say, the $1,000 right off the bat. So they're working the same amount, but they're not maybe making the same.
Okay. So that sounds to me like a problem where it's like it seems like not everyone has necessarily like is born into the same situation. So, maybe opportunity problem. So what I think is most interesting is that here's what's really going on. We have undoubtedly the wealthiest nation on the planet, but at the same time, 1 in 7 Americans live in poverty. 1 in 4, about roughly 1 in 5 children live in poverty. And we can get into the semantics of how we define poverty because there are a lot of people that live close to poverty, but not necessarily in poverty. So, it's interesting where I always consider a place like San Francisco, where there are people that live on Lombard Street in these, $6 million houses and drive Teslas, but down the street in the Tenderloin, you have people sleeping underneath ATM machines and, with shopping carts full of their things. And, oftentimes the trash cans are overflowing and you might find, even, human waste in the streets. And it's like, how could you have this city where two very different worlds are right next to each other? What a juxtaposition. And the problem is that we've gotten to a place where yes, there are more things and gadgets than ever, but most people still can't afford just to live. It's getting to be a problem. And we can see this sort of populism. And, I'll be honest, when I look at Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, I see a lot of finger wagging. I see a lot of scapegoating. I see a lot of appeal to, like emotion and people saying, those corporations, they did this. Here's what he didn't say. Corporations also employ people. And in many cases, a lot of people say, I want my job because that's how I make a living. So it's like, yes, they've done a lot of bad, but they've also done a lot of good. And our quality of life today is far better than it was even 50 years ago. Generally, the world poverty is decreasing, world mortality is decreasing, world crime is decreasing. The problem, though, is proportion. So for me, the problem is so let's say, like the idea with a tax is for me, it's supposed to be, in theory at least, redistributive. But here's the thing. I'm not just going to I'm not just making a donation to a school and saying, use this to pay for books. I'm giving it to a government and I'm just trusting that they are going to do good with it. And here's where the problem comes in. This government that is telling you right now we are the ones that are going to be able to summon this tax money to acquire it and then use it properly are the same people who have been in government for decades. So why haven't you done it already? That's my problem. I look at someone like Bernie Sanders, who's been in Washington for 50 years, and I say, if you've been saying this stuff the whole time and you truly mean it, how come your name isn't on any major legislation? How come you haven't done anything significant in Vermont? This is an anecdote, but I said this, last week during our rehearsal. My dad has stage 4 cancer. You want to cut me a check? I don't see any of these politicians cutting me a check. How much do they really care? Because at the end of the day, they go home to their vacation houses with their multiple cars and their 1%er lifestyle, right? So it's like, my problem is that I don't believe that you actually care. I think you are power hungry. I think it's a
So
power grab.
let me ask you this then. Do you think that this is a problem with
Well,
the
philosophically,
way our voting system is? I mean,
no,
because
here, it's a philosophy problem. The
okay,
problem is that, I'm sorry to cut you off. The problem is
alright,
that
okay.
a government that is strong enough and big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough and strong enough to take away everything that you have. So when you look at a country like Venezuela, where everyone thought that Chavez, Hugo Chavez started a revolution and we were all going to be living well, you now see a place where millions of people are starving, millions of people have left. You have a military dictator who is seizing the government hostage. You have riots in the streets. What about that sounds good? So what I am saying is that I don't trust the people in Washington, these people on stage, these people running, like Senator Sanders, who've been in government for 40 years. They have not demonstrated to me that they actually care about the people they say they care about. They've demonstrated to me that they care more about their vacation homes. They care more about their book deals. Capitalism's convenient when you sell a book, but it's not convenient when you're on stage in a debate. So I don't believe them. I don't trust them. This is a trust issue. And I think America, generally, that's what's happening. We don't trust each other anymore. We all thought after the Cold War we'd all get rich and capitalism won. A few people got rich. A lot of us got poor. A few of us are, shrinkingly in this middle class. And I agree it's a problem. And I agree that generally society, we need a place in which people can afford to buy groceries and afford daycare for their kids and afford to be able to take paid parental leave. Like, I agree with these things. I'm just saying I don't trust these people that are saying they can do it because they've had 50 years to do it and they haven't.
So who do you trust? Let me ask you that.
Honestly, no one. That's why
Okay.
we're here. I
Fair enough.
trust you a lot more than I trust anyone in Washington. And I think most Americans feel that way. That's why we get populist people. Look, Donald Trump didn't win 80% of the Republican vote. It was 16 people running. He won 30% and 30% and 35% and just enough in a fractured party. You look at Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire, a fractured party. He didn't win a majority of his party. He only won 27% of the vote. 73% of his party doesn't want him, but it's a fractured party. Look at that. Okay. Oh, there we go. 25%. Look at that.
A
That means
quarter. A
that means
freaking
that means
quarter.
right. That means 3/4 of your party doesn't want
Doesn't want
you to
you.
be the candidate. That's not winning the majority. That's just winning in a fractured party. There's a difference.
So let me ask you this then. What direction do you think this election and the next 4 years are going to have on, say, the minimum wage and these issues? Do you think that anything's going to change, or do you think that it's all just going to be fluff again? Do you think, what is
Well,
your opinion, right?
so I think that we are falling politically. I think a culture war is going on. I think
Between who and who, right?
between but a culture war generally between people that I would say are, frankly, I don't know. It's hard to say. How do I say this politely, or precisely? Generally, what the founders would say are elites in a way, and then the masses.
Okay.
I guess generally, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush because people are complicated. But yeah, that's what I would say. People who
Your
are
general statement.
yeah, people who are right now sitting at home and they have their Tesla charging in the garage.
Comfortably, right?
Right, and people who are working 2 or 3 jobs and their kid goes to a school that's underfunded and you know what I
Just
mean?
trying to
They
put food on the table.
yeah, just trying to put bread on the table. So, I think that that's what's going on, but I think the direction we're going for me is very scary because I think that I'll just start by saying that whether, populism from whatever side is populism. So, the cheese in the mousetrap is always free. People time and time again throughout history will get duped into thinking somehow we can just think about it. Do you really think the people that couldn't even figure out an Iowa caucus winner are competent enough to figure out a healthcare system for over 300 million people? Do you really believe that? are those the sort of people you really trust to be able to run an entire healthcare system for 300 plus million people? Because I don't. So that's the problem. It's like we have problems, but I don't trust the people in
You
office
don't trust the
to fix
government to
them.
be able to
I,
fix it.
I don't think they're competent enough.
You're saying that basically both sides, whatever the issue may be, are going to pit themselves against the other side to get their point across to say get elected again. That's what's
Yeah,
going on now.
in a way, yeah, I think we're going into the populism rabbit hole where basically the formula is you have been wronged by someone somewhere far away that's abstract, and because you have been wronged, you are entitled to some sort of justice, and it's going to be me that comes in and does that justice. Now, think about two statements rhetorically. One of them is something like billionaires shouldn't exist. Another one is drain the swamp. Those are both very populisty, both appealing to least common denominator kind of phrases that are meant to stimulate anger and emotion. It's clear what's going on. If you've read George Orwell's Animal Farm and you know about different types of propaganda, it's really obvious to see what's going on. So for me, what's concerning is like this formula of just someone coming in and being like, whether it's Trump or Bernie or Elizabeth Warren or whoever, coming in and saying some boogeyman far away, whether it's immigrants or corporations or whatever, has wronged you. I'm going to come in and be the superhero that solves all your problems in 4 years. Because that's not how reality works.
So let me ask you this. Let me interrupt you for a second. Okay, for those who don't really know populism and those who basically just work all day, how would you try to get this message out to them and convey this to candidates?
Well, so what I would say is that populism generally, and what I'm defining it as, is elites, people who are themselves elite, one percenters who in an effort to gain, you know, popularity among mass crowds of generally, working class people or disenfranchised or somehow marginalized or people who feel not heard. Generally, you have people who are elites who make wild claims about broad, rapid social structural change, thinking under the premise that if we change the system, somehow people will become better, but that's not how it works. People are just as greedy in capitalism as they are in socialism, which is why Nicolas Maduro has a mansion and there are people in Venezuela cooking cats and dogs over trash can fires in the streets for dinner. Okay? So it's like for me, I'm operating under the understanding that people aren't angels and capitalism, socialism that imagine this. Imagine a lake with 500 fish, and we all own it. Public ownership of the lake. We all own it together collectively. What's to stop me from coming in with a giant net and taking all 500 of those fish? And then you guys all starve.
Nothing. It's public. You're not doing anything wrong.
That's a socialist kind of situation, and everyone starves. So like that's not the answer.
So
And-
giving it to the public isn't necessarily solving the problem.
Well, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the philosopher, for people who may or may not be familiar, had an interesting, sort of theory where he said, imagine like a hare and a wolf, and we're all hunting collectively. There's three of us. If we all three work together, we can capture a wolf. It'll feed three of us, but it takes three of us to capture it. So we all have to work together. But it only takes one person to capture a hare, a rabbit, but it will only feed one person. So these people are sitting there waiting for a wolf all day long. All day long they see hares just running around, different opportunities to, they know all day long, hey, if I just give in and capture one of these, I get to eat. They don't, but I'm hungry. And all day long, they watch it until finally one of them caves and attacks the hare. The wolf goes by and they miss it. One of them eats, the other two starve. there's a survival instinct in us
It's human
that
nature.
I don't think changes just because the system changes. I don't think capitalism is corrupt. I think people are corrupt. I don't think the system exploits anybody. I think people who are greedy, like Jeff Bezos, exploit people.
Because they can. I mean, what's stopping them?
Right, but that's human corruption, not the system. So the
Okay.
system doesn't need to change. We need to address that person legally.
Okay.
Like, for
But-
example, if they don't pay taxes, sue them, bring them to court.
Yeah, but then they can just throw lawyers at you.
They'll pay a lot of legal fees, and
But to someone like Bezos, that's not really going to change anything, right?
that's fair. Okay.
Someone like us, right? We say you or I don't pay our taxes, right? Well, the government's going to come after us, right? Or it depends, you know? I mean, I've heard of people, I mean, I'm sure there's situations where if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to get in trouble for it. But I mean, I think that the more money you have, the more sway you have. I think that money talks.
It does, because of Citizens United and things like that that need to be over, Okay.
What
so
is
talk about it.
Citizens United?
Yeah,
I don't
so
know
let's
what
talk about that.
is.
So that is a very interesting 2010 landmark Supreme Court case in which there was a group, Citizens United, versus the U.S. government, basically. And I believe the ruling was a 5-4 ruling that basically argued. If we could pull that up, that would be great. But yeah, versus the
It
Federal
argued that
Exchange
basically
Commission.
money is speech in
Yeah,
simple terms.
Yeah, so limiting someone's ability or an organization's ability to donate to a political candidate, for example, would be restricting their First Amendment right.
Right. Correct. Yes.
But nowhere in the First Amendment does it say you have a right to donate to a political, like PACs aren't in the.
Because I posed the question to people, is that fair, right? Why does this person who's making millions of dollars have more of an influence because he has more money than someone like me who makes 10 times, 100 times, or not 100, but 50 times less than this when I care just as much about this country than someone else?
Right, and I agree with that. So let me I want to back up a little bit and just lay a base because I feel like I sort of skipped around a lot. I think that it is incredibly disastrous that we are living in a country this wealthy where we have so many children, people who live in poverty. We have record high right now for, levels of depression and anxiety, obesity and other, health related illnesses and, the opioid epidemic and, I want to empathize with all of that, but I just think that the answer is more complicated.
Yeah, it goes back to, like you were saying earlier, I think that it goes back to human nature. It goes back to people saying the right things and not actually doing things about it.
Well, so let's play both sides of an argument right now. For example, one common argument is metaphorically people saying sort of lift yourself up, the whole
build yourself out of the hole. Yeah.
Bootstrap. Right?
You work harder, you'll make it eventually. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, so people say bootstrap. Okay, so let me give you an example, a real life example that sort of counters, and then one that's one that's pro, and then one that counters. So, like a counter example would be, so actually I can use one person who I won't name that can actually satisfy both sides of this argument. So I had a friend, still have a friend, who between the ages of 0, like birth to 5 years old, lived on the streets. In Northern California, he was homeless. His family was homeless. He was born to not a good family situation. The father was not present or sober. So that is a situation where it's like you've got one mom who's got to provide. You guys are living on the streets. You can't just really bootstrap your way out of being homeless. Like it's harder than that. There is no simple way to just be like, oh, I'll just magically figure out how to not be homeless anymore, right? Like that's really hard, right? So that's sort of a counter against people say bootstraps, and it's like, Well, it's more complicated than that. Like, sometimes people have incredible amounts of adversity, and life is much more complicated than that, so it's hard. But here's something that's sort of pro the other side, which is like personal responsibility, bootstraps. So this same kid, fast forward to the age of 17, I met him when he was like 23, 24, but this kid decided that he didn't want to go to high school anymore, so he dropped out. So getting a job was very difficult because he didn't have a high school diploma, but that was an active decision he made when he should have graduated high school. That
Hmm.
makes it very hard to get a job. So that didn't
Yeah.
help.
People
Then
would
he
say he's trying to fail. He's failing before he's even
well,
started,
well, well, that
basically.
that's and this is there's a chain though, there's more. Then
Okay.
he wound up having, and I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm just saying that, there is a balance between like the circumstances you're in and also the ability you have to try to better those. Like you should be trying to better your situation, even if it's a bad situation. And then I can also understand societally, like we should have safety nets and more support, and life's complicated. But I'm just saying also, people should be make decisions in their own best interest, and sometimes people do not make decisions in their own best interest. So this kid, this friend of mine, wound up having a child with a girlfriend who wound up living with them. They didn't get married. But like they have a kid together, right? They're both very loving. But this kid, um, how should I want to say this very delicately. He doesn't spend the money he makes in his paycheck in the best interest always of his son and you know um the mother of the child. Sometimes he spends it on recreational things too much. Um, and when I knew him, he was actually in quite a bit of debt. So it's like you're actively taking money you should be spending on groceries and spending it on other things when you have a child. That's objectively a bad decision that you are making. So the government can't do anything to make you be a more proactive parent.
You have to
So
take
it's like
responsibility at some
so it's
point.
like I understand the argument where it's like it's hard to lift yourself out of your bootstraps, like especially because literally he grew up homeless. How hard? I mean, how what a nightmare, right? Honestly, what a nightmare. Like truly, truly horrific. I mean, I can't imagine like how horrible that must have been. But it's like knowing that and going through that actively, you're not trying to like better yourself. Like I'd always ask him like, any interest in going back to high school, getting a GED? Like, nope, not really. Like going from minimum wage job every 3 months to minimum wage job. And it's like, you're not really making decisions in your best interest. And it's like, it's hard to want to help someone who doesn't even want to help themselves.
Yes. So why should I
So
have to help them? Is that count? Is the argument to
no,
that?
no, no, it's not the argument. It's just a point. It's just one point. I could see. I'm trying to round this out so we
Yeah.
can
No, I
see
get
sort
what
of
you're
from
saying.
every angle. And this just so happened to be an example. But honestly, these real problems we're talking about are things like there are whole towns and communities where there are no jobs. People just go to high school and then when they graduate, there's literally no work. I mean, there are these towns in Ohio and Arkansas and Iowa and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania that used to be coal or steel or train or lumber, and now there's no more work. And I'm not saying, that we necessarily need to have this mentality of, bring back your jobs or anything like, it's sort of that Trump populism you see. But, what I am saying is that people need to be able, like 99% of people, their number one concern is how am I going to afford to live? So I understand that that's a problem, but I don't think that like it's as simple as just saying, "Oh, it's those corporations." You mean the one that you guys all support? You mean like it's like Americans say they don't like Amazon, but 54% of American households have Amazon Prime members. They're actively shopping. So it's like, do you or don't you? Like make up your mind. Like at some point, honestly, it's frustrating. It's like you need to start making up your mind. In the 1960s, when African Americans said we don't want to, ride this bus because it's, segregated, they boycotted the bus system. That was a definitive decision. But now you have people that are literally like going on Target runs and then criticizing big corporations, and it's like you're enabling them.
So do you think that people should? I mean, I totally get what you're saying, but for me, I think it's kind of where would you go to get your basic needs because
Here's what I'm saying.
everything's
America's problem is that people are so poor that they need to shop at Walmart, but they hate the fact that these big corporations are raking in the billions and not paying it back. Like society's not getting better. Like there's a lot of money being generated. So it's like people are in this loop where it's like, I'm so broke, I have to eat at McDonald's on the dollar menu. But it's like now you're supporting a big global multinational corporation that, is, exploiting the environment and exploiting their employees, and like doing all these things. And it's like, so it's this weird cycle we're in where it's like, we people we literally can't afford to break out of this cycle we're in where it's like people have to go shop at Walmart because they can't afford to go to the private custom mom and pop that's 3 times the price. They literally can't afford it. But it's
I
those
mean, shoot, mom and pops are closing like every
Yeah,
day, it seems
right.
like,
But it's also
because it is so expensive.
and I think the problem here, I guess what I should say is, so here's where I'm trying to like sort of come to.
Simplify
I
it.
simplify it down to what Andrew Yang has said and what Bernie Sanders has said.
Okay.
So just notice the different frameworks. Bernie Sanders has a sort of fear mongering mindset where he says nobody is allowed to be a billionaire. Andrew Yang has the kind of growth, prosperity mindset where he says, I believe everybody can be a billionaire. Do you see how one empowers you and one limits you? So when I hear nobody should be allowed to be a billionaire, I'm thinking you're discouraging people from trying to achieve. When I hear Andrew Yang say everyone can be a billionaire, I think you're empowering people to realize that they can better their situation in some way. They can make interests in their, they can make decisions in their best interests. Like sometimes it is about looking yourself in the mirror and being like, I need to be more disciplined. I know a lot of people, like my friend I won't name, who get a paycheck and have other obligations like a car payment, but they go spend it on like alcohol. And then their car payment comes and they go, Mom and Dad, I need to borrow money for the car payment. You
Let
probably
me ask
should.
you this. Do you think addiction plays a role in that?
Oh, definitely. But
Do you
I mean,
think
I don't
that
mean, I don't mean, well, I don't mean to like pick on people who consume alcohol recreationally.
No, no, I no, no,
I'm just
I'm not.
saying that, the idea that,
Well, let me get to hold on. Not to interrupt you, but
please.
um do you think the message of what what candidates are displaying in the sense of distributing wealth is the wrong, issue in the sense that like, you have your friend who's dealing with maybe an addiction and they're not talking about that. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do you think
So,
that talking about that would help more than maybe talking about, giving or blaming the big corporations for you being poor, right?
yeah. Um, how should I say this? I think the real solution, because here's on one hand, what I think needs to happen is that corporations, frankly, need to be held accountable, and there are a lot of legal loopholes where they dodge taxes. And so I think that there are a lot of things like schools and hospitals and fire departments that are just underfunded and they could be funded, but corporations are very good at dodging taxes. So I think tax evasion is a huge problem that needs to be addressed. I think there needs to be better bookkeeping and maybe a more proactive IRS. I don't know, but I just think that we need to talk about the tax code generally, I will say, but what I'm also saying is that America right now is having a crisis of purpose, a crisis of meaning, and a check from the government isn't going to make you feel more fulfilled inside. It's not going to make you feel like you have a purpose in life. What makes people feel like they have a purpose in life is having a job where they feel like they're contributing, where they feel like they can actually contribute something to the world. where they feel like they're being productive. The reason why people in towns where there are no jobs are killing themselves in large numbers is because they have nothing meaningful to do with their life. And sending them a check for $1,000 a month is not going to change that depression. So what I'm saying is that our problem is not going to be a problem, our crisis of meaning, our crisis of history, of values, all these conflicts we're having is not as simple as cut a check, tax people. That's not going to make you feel philosophically more like an American. That might, you know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of people in
Totally
this
what you're
country.
saying.
I know a lot of people in this country who are so unhealthy in their family dynamic that they unfriend each other on Facebook because of politics. That is a crisis of purpose. I would recommend counseling, not a monthly check. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I totally get what you're
that's a
saying.
crisis of purpose. So what I'm saying is that it's not as simple as just saying, "Hey, and what I'm also saying is that we're partly responsible." What I'm saying is that people, if you don't like Amazon right now when you're listening to this, stop buying Amazon products. Cancel your Prime membership. If you don't like, some makeup company, animal lab tests their products, don't buy from that company. If you don't like farm processed meat, like factory farm
Don't
meat,
buy it.
don't buy Tyson chicken nuggets at the grocery store. Don't buy Dino nuggets. What I'm saying is back up what you say. And the reason why I don't trust people in Washington is because they say one thing and do another. They say, we're going to make your life better. We're going to take your money and then it's going to be distributed and everything's going to be good. And then what happens is 40 years go by. You're still there. You're a millionaire. We're all still poor. So what I would ask Bernie Sanders is, what happened to those 40 years? Where did they go? Where did the time go? Where did it go? How come things aren't better? You've had all this power for decades. What happened?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm just saying, you want to be president, everyone criticizes the current president. I don't think anyone's really any better at all. I don't think there's a single candidate that has any real sense of direction or vision or how to fix this problem. What I really see is a lot of people with a lot of big egos staging a power grab, calling it some sort of enlightenment.
So, what do we do as Americans? I mean, how can we? I mean, I think what you're making is really good points. I think that you're really testing that issue, but we still got to vote for someone, man. I mean,
I know.
so
I know.
I don't know, man. I think that
Let me ask you, describe some of the characteristics of an ideal president for 2020 without worrying about names or who's actually running. Just what are some of your ideal characteristics you're seeking?
relatability,
Regardless of gender, age, color,
relatability.
creed. Okay,
Okay,
okay.
relatability.
Meaning,
In the sense that they are able to understand. So basically, my ideal candidate is someone who has worked to get to where they are. Not it hasn't been given to them, right? In the sense that they have, that American dream that everybody talks about, right? In the sense where you work to be successful. I think that an ideal candidate is able to speak to that message and is able to understand issues such as equality, women's rights, in the sense of like abortion. And I think that they're able to talk about those issues, not in the sense of trying to sway people one way or the other, but bring someone to the table, both sides to the table, and be like, look, this is what's going on, and you both are right in your own way, but we need to reach across the aisle rather than blame each other for nothing getting done. And I think that it's hard nowadays because we are so polarized to find that type of candidate. I mean, I think that it's hard when you have to get money to run, and then the money influences you when you're running, and then when you say something or something doesn't go your way, you have to pivot because you have to be able to reach those people that you're not reaching, right? I think that it just has to do with the way we elect people. I mean, that's where I think our biggest problem is, I love a representative government. I think that it on paper is a good idea, but going back to what you were saying about human nature, I think that humans, this is a very realist idea, but humans look out for themselves. They are going to look out, oh, well, if I do this issue, I'm able to get this voter, so I'm going to go out and say this thing. And then when they're president, oh, I'm president. I am now the executive branch. What I say goes. I control the military. I can influence the courts. I can influence the legislative branch. So this is what I'm going to do. So they let go of what they were running for, right? And I think that, to go back to your ideal candidate, I think that someone who is working for America, not working for themselves.
I don't have a political agenda in the sense that, I mean, on the ballot, my voter registration is no party preference, none, nothing preferred. I have things that I value personally, but I want to learn, and from listeners and viewers, and we want feedback, and this is supposed to be a learning experience. So honestly, and I say things all the time, and then I go back and forth and disagree with myself all the time. So even things I say.
I just did it in the video, so
Yeah.
exactly is proving our point.
Exactly. So this isn't about I'm not trying to
Who's
make
right or who's wrong. We're just trying to have a conversation, guys. Sorry to interrupt my friend, but sometimes he likes to use a lot of fluff words instead of just getting to the point.
I do. I can be tangential. It's true.
But yeah, no, guys. I mean, we're here for a conversation and hopefully to start having conversations with you guys. I mean, we will take the time out of our day to respond to your guys' comments, to respond to your guys' wants, your needs, your questions, your whatever. I mean, who we are is we're here for you guys, and we're here to help us and help us and you learn and grow, and we're here for everyone. I don't know. That sounds kind of cheesy, but
more formally, we're also here because people have to start being able to listen to each other and look each other in the face before we have a civil upheaval. Seriously, we have 1 in 7 Americans that live in poverty. I don't want to see a revolution happen. And I hear a lot of people saying that word revolution, and it's I remember the French Revolution where people were getting guillotined and storming the Bastille, and that was not pretty or fun. It's very bloody and unpleasant.
Okay,
so
cut this out, Eric. Keep saying what you're trying to say to the viewers in the sense of I don't know.
I'm saying this because this podcast is about repairing the social contract. Because if we can't tolerate each other and live peacefully together with diverse range of thoughts and feelings without resorting to violence, then this is going to get violent. And I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see the yellow vest movement in Paris where they burn shops and flip cars over in the streets. I don't want to see millions of people on the freeway, protesting the government. So I also don't want to see tanks in the streets or people getting hit with riot shields. So, honestly, this podcast is also a job in repairing the social contract so that, thank you, this is a great example where you have people in China who are standing up to a government.
And right now in Hong Kong.
Activism who were then killed, and it is not spoken about. This is something that is not spoken about, not acknowledged. You're not going to hear Xi Jinping talking about, look at the Hong Kong protests. Yeah, let's look at the Hong Kong protests that have been going on.
Which is going on today, guys, if you don't know.
It's been going on for 6 months. I mean, you literally have police.
And it's mostly youth and educated individuals protesting, guys.
Yes, look at that. Stop killing us. I mean, look at that. They're flying flags and they're marching in the streets.
I mean, do you want the United States to turn into that?
No.
That's the big question you have to ask yourselves.
You could also look up the Yellow Vest movement protests. There are also in France. There's also been a lot of protests in Iran by young, educated people. Yeah, look at the Yellow Vest movement. Yeah. Waving flags, tear gassing, tearing up shops in the streets. I mean, look at this. Yeah. Keep going. There we go. Yeah, see? If you look at Venezuela, things will even scarier will pop up. That's one a lot of people don't talk about very much, but a lot of the, I mean, look at that. People literally in the streets. Look at that. Holding signs. Millions of people. Look at that.
No dictator.
Look at that. Look at that.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. That's crazy. All right.
Holy hell.
Look
I
at
wonder
that.
if
It
that
says
guy's
right there
proud of that.
Venezuela protests 200,000 march against President Maduro. 200,000 people. That's like half of the population of the state of Wyoming. It's a lot of people, dude. I'm just saying I don't want so this podcast, this is about a repair job. We need to get healthy dialogue going again and start building bridges instead of, tearing each other apart. I mean, I don't want to see this kind of violent protest. I want my kids to grow up thinking they might get capped if they go to school because of
Or
violent
arrested for
protests.
saying the wrong thing.
I mean, we're not even Googling like Ecuador or El Salvador, where MS-13 is from. In El Salvador, little kids go to school carrying guns because they
Right.
might be assaulted in the streets. I mean, I think it was Vice that covered this a lot, but if you look at El Salvador like violence, it's pretty crazy. They have trucks that go around at night, patrol trucks that go around at night. The same can be said of Boko Haram in Nigeria. But yeah, I mean, kids go to school and, they don't know if they're going to come home alive. This is the kind of stuff I'm trying to absolutely avoid.
So on that note, guys, we have been going for a while, and we are going to wrap it up. All
Bye-bye.
right, so
Bye,
bye.
everybody.
We will talk to you guys next time. Thank you, Eric, for
Such a positive note to leave off on.
it's you know what? We're just trying to help, everybody understand things. So, but I'm not going to go on a rant. I'm going to say we will see you guys next time. We can continue this conversation. We will probably start with something else and see where it goes. Thanks for viewing. If you guys enjoyed this video or want to see more of it, hit that subscribe button, and we really appreciate the thumbs up or thumbs down. And please comment on what you guys think. All right, bye.
If you want to see Eric go home tonight, please go ahead and become a Patreon member. Feel like you can go ahead and become a Patreon member. Go ahead and give us some money so that we can keep the lights on and so that we can feed Eric while he's in our cold, dark basement. I'm sorry, he can go home tonight if you become a Patreon member. So please, again, that's Bridging the Gap on Patreon. That is Bridging the Gap. Bridging the Gap. Please become a member on Patreon so that Eric, our producer, can go home tonight. Thank you.
And
Nice.
cut.